really quickly get the link here and link this up to Patreon. And then we should, if I'm doing this correctly, which hopefully I am, Okay, great. All right, so it looks like it's still working. All right. So this is kind of fitting actually, because today, right now, as I'm doing this live, it is Friday, June 6th. And I'm going to check to make sure that I'm absolutely correct. But yes, so it is Friday, which puts it at Venus's day. It is currently Venus's hour. And Venus just ingressed into her domicile sign of Taurus earlier this afternoon. So this is a very Venusian night, which I suspect that if people, well, I mean, maybe my lives won't be so full of visitors, even as few as they normally have, because people are busy doing fun Venusian activities like spending time with lovers or doing beautification routines, getting their beauty sleep perhaps. But I thought that was kind of fitting because immediately once Venus went into Taurus, which for me was my 5th house, which is like recreation, also children, creative output, anything that is creative that you make is in the 5th house basically, as well as the things that you have fun doing, recreational hobbies and activities. So for me, that's where Venus is going domicile. And from there, she'll be trining my natal Venus in Virgo in the 9th. And the first thing that I did was I didn't realize that Venus had gone into Taurus when I was doing this, but then in retrospect, I was like, oh, haha, it's happening. But I went to Staples and I bought a more aesthetically pleasing binder to fit my research material for the Acanthus and Crow deck that I'm working on so that I could more easily access it. Before I had one of these big honking binders, which did fit all the material, but it had like the hole punchy things on the side instead of the middle. So that makes it so that you can have more space, but unfortunately it also makes it so that it's much harder to turn each individual page, and it was driving me nuts, and I didn't do anything about it until Venus entered Taurus and trined my natal Venus in Virgo, and I was like, all right, enough is enough. This is not an optimized system. It doesn't look good on my desk. I don't want to interact with it as much as I would otherwise want to interact with it. So I went and I bought a really nice binder, and I cleaned up my office. I have this little mini vase that I put on my altar. I'll show you guys. I pruned my garden and I cut these flowers and I put them in my little mini vase. And that's sitting up here decorating my altar. So it's very much like Venus and Taurus, just generally, because I spent my time doing recreational activities. I spent a lot more time with kids, my kids, obviously, because the 5th house. And then another interesting thing too is that I was pruning my garden, which I do recreationally, but of course Taurus is the Venus of manifestation. That's very earthly and very tactile, material, connected to the land, classically associated with like plowing and tilling the earth and all that. So I was literally in the garden, which was fun. And then I brought the garden in my workspace to beautify my workspace, and which is also my ritual space. And like I said, that Taurus Venus, that transit Taurus Venus is trining my natal Venus in Virgo, right? So it's like making things clean, making things pure, coming up with systems to refine philosophy, spirituality, academics, because those are 9th house topics. So it all kind of fit together. And I also earlier that day got a really helpful feedback from my astrology book club. For my Acanthus and Crow cards. I just recently finished all 3 decans of Gemini, which is also very fitting because we're currently in the, I believe we're in the middle decan of Gemini right now with the sun. Yes, we are. We are in the Mars ruled decan of Gemini. The sun is in the middle of Gemini season. So I'm not sure how many people will attend this live, but I'm just going to start pulling cards and maybe talking about the cards and stuff. But if you guys are interested, since it's easy enough to show you. So this is the chart of the hour. This is the sun right now. And also this is funny because the chart of the hour is literally a Capricorn rising, which is mine as well. There you go. So we have the sun right here at 16 degrees Gemini, where it is right here. And these are the bounds, these small ones, and these are the decans. So this is the bound that the sun is in right now, which is also known in the tarot community as corresponding to the 9 of Swords. Natally, my my Mars is in this decan of Gemini, which means it's in its own decan. And planets that are seen as being planets that are in their own decan, according to Austin Coppock, are seen as having like a superpower, or they might otherwise be lacking in other areas of dignity. Not necessarily, but they could be. But if they're in their own decan, it doesn't exactly give that planet more dignity in the classical sense of like making it more powerful or stronger, or even necessarily building better results per se. But he describes it as being like a superpower, right? So like, let's say, you know, your Mars is in the Mars ruled decan of Gemini, but otherwise without dignity, which is the case for me. I definitely find that I have these towers of the mind, lots of anxious thoughts. Of course, it's sextiling its ruler Mercury in the eighth house, which is a place of mental anguish, so it makes sense. I naturally have a lot of experience with anxiety. It has, however, propelled me to think more critically and carefully about the narratives that people tell themselves, that I tell myself. When I was younger and when I was quite upset with the world, it really allowed me to pinpoint the specific ways that words could be used to hurt others, because I felt that they were routinely used to hurt me. And it did become kind of like a superpower. Like I could look at people and I immediately kind of knew where that pressure point was, or which words to say that would just really devastate people. Obviously, later on my spiritual journey, I was like, oh, this is actually adding a net bad into the world, and retaliation, and like it's not exactly the result I want, you know? I mean, they say turnabout's fair play, but you know, fighting fire with fire just gets you more fire, right? Fighting darkness with darkness just gets you more darkness. And so I don't know, about this time I was kind of more drawn towards my spiritual endeavors anyway. And so that really kind of prompted a big shift in attitude. But because I spent so long analyzing people for mental weaknesses, it became actually a great source of spiritual healing for me and for the people around me, because I also knew like which wounds to speak to. And it took me a long time to learn how also to speak to people about those things. You know, it's some things can be really sensitive, and it also took me a long time. I have a lot of like very like fire air energy in my chart, really. A little bit of ground too, a little bit of earth, but it took me a long time to realize like how to be more delicate with people, and something I'm still working on. But so I don't know, like I do, and I also feel that the Mars being in his own decan also has lended this ability to just absolutely like hyperfixate on my work and my duties, my obligations, and just really like force myself to do things that I don't necessarily have the energy for or want to do if it serves this higher purpose, which usually manifests as me putting in like 18-hour days without breaks to finish my tarot card decks, or to make like the cards as perfect and beautiful as they possibly can be. So anyway, so it's interesting too, because you like the sixth house is a place of duty, obligation, slavery, routines, but like routines you do to keep yourself from dying, you know, to keep the bad away. It's a house of illness. So I do think that Mars and Gemini in general does kind of cause me to overwork myself. But I think that him being in his own decan, it's like I've figured out a system that at least produces something that I'm happy with. Of course, anyway, there are other factors, but for whatever reason, since the sun is in that decan of Gemini right over my Mars, I thought I might share it with you. I might illuminate it for those who may be interested. So, and I'm only talking about myself because no one else is here. So if someone else was here, I'd be talking about you. All right, speaking of, here we got a card. So, oh, look at this. We have the Eight of Wands reversed. Yeah, slow going, isn't it? So I'll turn it upright so that those of you watching this after after the live has already aired on my Patreon can see it more clearly. The Eight of Wands is one of my favorite cards, actually. This corresponds to the Mercury ruled decan of the zodiac sign Sagittarius. Typically, in the tarot cliff notes, right, it denotes very swift action and words, messages. It's literally like, you know, Mercury hurrying it up to deliver the message or deliver the good, the parcel, whatever it is. Typically, when we see the Eight of Wands, like things are going really, really fast, right? Sagittarius is a fire sign. It's very fast. Mercury is a fast planet. Mercury is also the communicator, the messenger, the intellect, reason, logic, understanding. And I don't mean understanding like illumination like the sun. I mean like technical, like, oh, yes, right, I've received the message. I got it. In the sign of Sagittarius, where its overall ruler is Jupiter, these messages tend to be uplifting, even kind of tilting on the spiritual side. They're expansive. It's like, I think Austin Coppock in either one of his courses or his book, 36 Faces, I don't recall which off the top of my head, but I think he had said it's something like, what was it? Like a key point of information that just kind of is like, oh, eureka, right? I've got it. I've figured out how to overcome the thing or how to do the thing, or there's a key piece of information that's received at just the right time. Other ways that this also manifests is just moving quickly, progress, things going really fast. When it's reversed, obviously, we say, oh, grinding halt, things are not going fast. Mercury's confused, he's retrograde, he's not delivering the message, whatever it is. Things are going really, really slow. And it's funny because, right, I started this live talking about, oh, Venus went into Taurus, which is really good, but Taurus is a very slow sign. And Venus is all about pleasure. She's of the night sect, and she kind of, in Taurus, she's allowed to go at her own pace, do things slowly, do things sensually, things that feel good at the moment they feel good, with people that she prefers to be around, like it's all very material, it's all very sensual. And I think that's kind of funny because it does speak to like a certain slowness, which I typically am not super cool with. I generally like it when things are moving quickly. But I think, I think there's some, some good that can come out of that. So anyways, there was another thing too. I'm trying to remember where I heard this piece of information. I'm not sure. I can't remember if I thought of it independently even. I'm pretty sure, I think that in Austin Coppock's book, 36 Faces, he says something about the ability of Mercury and words, Mercury and the concepts that he governs, words, awareness, that kind of thing, to kind of like, first of all, be delivered very quickly, spread very rapidly, but there was some kind of implication of how it can bypass physical barriers, right? And kind of like get into the heart of a matter or the issue of a matter. Your mind can go places that your body physically can't. And there's kind of this idea of like an arrow and the ability of the arrow to penetrate between plates of armor to really hit at the core of an issue or topic. The other thing too is that something this card reminds me of, particularly when it's upright, is sort of like the ability of thoughts and words to infect people, groups of people, and kind of spread like wildfire, right? Like once you have an idea, you hear a thought, you can't really unhear it or unknow it. You can kind of forget key points. It can get mystified or concealed by the obscurity of time, but it's always kind of with you in some way, shape, or form. And particularly, like the more impactful, the more meaningful that thought, the longer it sticks with you, the more profound it is, the more influencing it is. And so sometimes when I see the Eight of Wands, particularly if there are other cards that imply a more spiritual and less material tint, so I don't know, other wand cards, some sword cards if it's like discussions and thoughts, maybe cup cards if it's like feelings that go really quickly. Sometimes I think of this as like, oh, this is like a big, something that's gaining in momentum, and it could very easily, it might be triggered by a piece of information, a thought, a desire, a spark of awareness, or this kind of divine inspiration in a lot of cases. But it's gonna really penetrate through the defenses of whether it's like mental, psychic defenses or physical defenses or whatever, so that it can propagate within the self, right? Like a virus might. For better or for worse, I suppose. I mean, the virus analogy makes it sound like it's for worse, but it can be for better. It can be a good thought. It can be a good intrusive thought. Those do exist, I'm told. Oh, that's another thing. I think having Mars in an air sign and in Gemini, particularly in my chart, where so much is kind of like ruled sort of by Mercury, I do definitely have this really big problem with intrusive thoughts. It's been, honestly, they haunt me just all the time, of every nature and variety. Like they just, my mind never stops talking or spiraling. So I don't know. I do think that Mars in air signs, because Mars is the tower, right? So it brings you towers of the mind, right? There's a lot of anxiety. In the sixth house, I, especially earlier on, and still sometimes even now, do kind of suffer from like hypochondriac tendencies, I'm always really worried about like health things spiraling out of control. And the idea that you can't see them is very unnerving to me. You might not know you have something until it's too late. So those are kind of thoughts that I get a lot. But anyway, just the ability for thoughts to move very quickly and to gain a lot of momentum is something we often see with the Eight of Wands. And people sometimes get this confused in this card because the wands are not super clear, but it's the pine trees. It's each individual tree. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then there's 8 right back there. But another tip for reading the Nameless One, So all of the wand cards will have the alchemic signal for alchemic glyph sign for fire or whatever element it is in the construction of the inner border of the sigil. So for fire, it is an upwards pointing triangle. So you know this is a fire card. And then the amount of dots are the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I was like looking through the screen and I lost count of my dots. But anyway, so the 8 dots are meant to represent that it's the 8 and then of fire or of wands. The reason I did this was because even though I didn't want names or titles or even really like numbers to distract people from really allowing their subconscious to like connect to the imagery of the card, quantity, numerology, the numerology still has a meaning on the card and I didn't want that to be lost. So instead of taking the symbol for quantity, aka the number, I put physically the quantity, right? There's 8 dots in here and they're in a fire sign. So there's 8 fires, right? Which is a lot of fire to deal with. And yeah, if you have 8 fires all going next to each other, they're probably going to merge really quickly and rapidly spin out of control. One thing I wanted to add is because Jupiter is this greater benefic, this gas giant uplifts, you know, is very like spiritualizing in a lot of cases. The Eight of Wands can, and you know, wands in general can, of course, be cards of inspiration. It's that kind of divine spark, the animating principle, whether that's this divine spark to animate like a, you know, give life, give birth to a creative project or whatever it is. The Eight of Wands can kind of be that initiating, like, oh, yes, we're going with this now. I'm going to take it and run with it, is like a good keyword or key phrase for the Eight of Wands. Yeah, so when it's reversed, we're just dealing with stagnation. Things aren't going as quickly as we'd like. We don't have that divine spark yet. We're missing something. We're waiting for something. It was a really big part, and it still is a really big part of my personal so-called spiritual journey to understand the concept of divine timing. I'm still trying to figure out where the balance of fate and free will kind of leaves us psychologically or philosophically. I do believe in free will, and I do believe in fate, and I, as of this moment, kind of view it like there are certain events that are just fated to happen, like keystone events. And then there are some things that we possess some wiggle room where if we really work towards a certain outcome, we may or may not be able to tip the scales, you know, in our favor or in certain directions. And I kind of view it like you don't really know until you try, right? So who's to say? And I think there, I gotta pull in my chair. There are so many different ways for a single event to manifest that it's kind of like you put in as much effort as you can, and then at least you can say you tried your best, right? Like if it's truly not meant to happen, it's not meant to happen. But there's also just the pure issue of timing. I also sometimes think about how when you learn about rhetoric, you learn about logos, which is to use logic, you know, debate something, think about things critically. And then you also have pathos, which is to develop the emotional tie, right? You can compel somebody to do something by using, I'm going to say emotional manipulation, but I don't necessarily mean for nefarious purposes, which is the connotation. I mean, like, you know, when you read a really amazing story and it makes you cry, right? They're manipulating your emotions. If they're too transparent about this or they do it ham-handedly, we say, oh, you know, it really ruined the illusion. I felt they were just trying to like tug at my heartstrings or something. So it really is an act of subtlety, this use of pathos. But it can also be just a genuine thing, like when somebody makes a plea for help, when somebody makes a, you know, tries to demonstrate their remorse in a really heartfelt apology, right? They're using pathos to appeal to the other party. And then there's also ethos, which is authority. Do you have the authority to speak on something, right? When anybody says, as a doctor, I believe, or as a lawyer, or as an artist, right? They're demonstrating their ethos, their ability to remark on a subject based on their relative status and comprehension, understanding of to that subject. Well, there's another one that really doesn't get talked about that much anymore, but it's called Kairos, I believe. And that is timing, right? That is making sure that you are speaking to somebody at the exact moment when they are receptive to being spoken to. Because, you know, an argument could be made, if you don't have that key element, if you don't have that kairos, it's just for naught. It doesn't matter how logical you are. It doesn't matter how emotionally and heartfelt you are. And it doesn't matter how much authority you have. If a person is simply not willing to receive you, it's going to get blocked. So sometimes when this card shows up reversed, it's just like, this is not the time for that, right? We have to wait. We have to sit with things. We're just not ready for some reason. You know, there's a higher reasoning behind it that we're just not aware of. I don't love to fall back on that excuse, but sometimes it's true, right? Sometimes things just slot into place when when it's appropriate, when it's ready. There are lots of things that I think probably everybody has experience with in hindsight, where it's like, oh, I really wanted to move into this house, but then it sold and I was so upset. But then like 3 months later, I found an even better house. It was an even better deal, and it was so perfect for me in every way. And I was so thankful that I never bought that other one. And it's like, yeah, because it wasn't meant for you. The timing wasn't right. Part of this idea of like fate or things that are meant to be is that it has to happen. So when things don't go according to your plan, that wasn't, the plan for you. It wasn't in your fated destiny, your allotment. But I also am very wary of this because sometimes it's an excuse, right? It's like an ego excuse. It's something that we tell ourselves so that we don't have to try our hardest and then are still met with the failure. And then we have we don't have this excuse of like, well, I didn't really give it my best effort, or I didn't really go for it. So it wasn't, it wasn't me. I could have done it if I wanted to, kind of a thing. So sometimes I do believe that like the premise of waiting for divine timing for things to just naturally fall into place, like it's not all encompassing, right? You should still be actively working towards building up the momentum to go wherever it is you want to go. And if even then it doesn't work out, you can say, oh, well, it's not meant to be. I'm missing something or something else or whatever. If you're really honestly giving it your best effort to build momentum, like from you, because you desire it, because you feel like this is in alignment with your greater purpose, what have you. But if you're just sitting around like, well, if it's meant to be, it'll be, a job will fall into my lap, or a love interest will come sweep me off my feet, or, I'll just suddenly land in $1 million house, or whatever it is that you're desiring. I think you have to be doing something to kind of like meet Cosmos halfway, right? Like you have to actually be making, sometimes, sure, sometimes crazy windfalls happen out of nowhere and we're just lucky that way or unlucky that way, depending on what it is. But usually I think there's a fair amount of like personal action that can be, I don't know, done, So I am very critical of things like that. I do believe in things like divine timing, kairos, right? Receptivity. But I'm also wary about using those things as justifications to remain inactive. That said, there are cases when, inaction is not inherently preferable to action, right? So it's never so simple as just like always act. But, you have to use all of your elements, You have to feel it, you have to think it, you have to have the material ability, and you have to have the feelings. You have to have all of those things, I think, in some amount, some proportion. But anyway, I'll just keep pulling cards, I guess, and I don't know, maybe this will just turn into a reading for the collective or something. I don't know. We shall see. I probably am only going to go to about 11, and it's 10:21 right now. Also, some people ask me how I shuffle the Nameless One. I just got an email about this, I think, because it's so big. Yeah, the Nameless One's really big. The reason is because, and I'll pull a card here, get Virgo. Sorry, I'm laughing. This is Virgo. This is the Mask of Virgo. You can tell that it's a court card because all the court cards in this deck are masks. If you look up here, I'll get really close in so you can see the details. It's appropriate because it's Virgo, but it's also necessary because all of my work is incredibly detail oriented and pretty elaborate and symbolic because my Venus is in Virgo in the 9th. So sue me. No, please don't. Anyway, so this is the glyph for Virgo here. I've combined it with the glyph for Mercury. You might be tempted to read this as a Taurus if you only look at that, but no, it's Mercury, the little head and his little horns and his little cross thing there. So Mercury's the ruler of Virgo, so that's why this is the constellation for Virgo mirrored on each side of the mask, and all of the masks have this, by the way. When I made the Nameless One originally, I did give the mask a glyph. I think I included Mars for Scorpios and also Pluto's for Scorpio. Maybe I should look and find out. I think that's what I did. But I do think that when all of my first edition grimoires sell out of the Nameless One, I'm going to do a second edition with a different cover. I'm going to put in a giant foreword of some philosophical, spiritual things that I have found to be true that I was not aware of when I first made that book, or that that it wasn't such a big deal to me at the time or whatever. I do want to also go back in the grimoire and add specifically things about the decans because, I don't know, I've learned so much more about them since doing it. So I'd like to do that. And I would also like to reconfigure the cup court cards a bit, because they were the only court cards that I kind of broke with the pattern of making the king's cardinal, the queen's fixed, and the prince or princess mutable. So I think I'm going to retroactively alter that, which really won't have much of a difference because there are no titles on any of these cards. So if you want to call a prince a king, you know, you're more than welcome. But it bugs me not having that consistency. I thought it wouldn't, and I was wrong. It does. So anyway, so I'm going to go change it. And yeah, I'm going to add a bunch of stuff. I'm going to like take out some things and write a big old foreword about the kinds of changes I've made and why, and then have a different cover that will have metallic foil on it with a different design. So that will be the second edition, and I will discontinue the first edition after that. So anyway, I don't know. Keep your grimoires, I guess, because the first editions will, because of this, end up being limited edition, I suppose. Yeah, I can't stand the idea that there will be outdated representations of my work or intellectual stuff out there, but that is kind of just the nature of producing and being an artist who is human and learns and grows and changes their mind occasionally about certain things. So I don't know, it's kind of a fun way to mark a journey. But anyway, so this is the Mask of Virgo. If I got these two things in a reading together, which I guess I am, I would say maybe things are not going so fast because you are obsessively nitpicking over the details. Virgo is really big on system optimization, defining, distilling. I've talked a lot about Gemini lately. I did not connect this to the fact that our sun is currently in the sign of Gemini, because to be honest, when you get further into astrology, you almost forget about the sun, even though it's such a big deal when you start out. It's really very indicative of like, or not indicative, I guess, but representative, I don't know, of how we live our lives day to day. Like the sun is such a huge fucking deal, you guys. It really can't be overstated. I think anyone with half a brain kind of knows this, right? We would have no life on Earth without the sun. We'd have no solar system. It's like a big deal, you know, but it's there every day. We really take it for granted. We don't think about it so much. It's always filtering everything. When it is daytime, the sun is out, which is when we go about doing most of our endeavors that are like related to the external solar world, but we just take it for granted. We're like, yeah, you know, whatever, another day, another dollar, get up and do your business or whatever. Anyway, so it's kind of funny how like when you're younger, maybe the days have a bigger shift or something. I don't know, maybe you'd notice it more, maybe not, but definitely my case is my personal experience is like when I was first starting in with astrology, you know, it's all about sun signs. That's where the most information that is just like on the surface level available to people. You read horoscopes in like the bookstore. A lot of them are about your sun sign or whatever. And then you get into so much of this, all this other like refined, detailed system, right? That you almost forget like this big, huge pressing mechanism that like it revolves around. But you're like, oh, well, you know, the sun sign is one thing, but you know, you've got all these other planets and aspects and houses in there, and but the sun is really important anyway. So for whatever reason, and maybe that, I've been really thinking about Gemini a lot. I recently, like I think I said in the beginning of this nice little lonely monologue I'm having, that I had just recently finished all 3 cards that correspond to all 3 decans of the Acanthus and Crow Oracle deck. So I've been thinking about them quite a bit. I also, because this just happened to be where I was in the queue, I also posted Union, which is the card from the Onyx Tarot that is the equivalent of the Lover's card in a more traditional tarot deck, which represents Gemini. So been talking a lot about Gemini. Kind of glad to not do it anymore, hopefully soon, because I've been thinking about it kind of obsessively. Well, anyway, Gemini, the other Mercury ruled sign that I've talked so much about, is about collecting all of the data, right? It's the twins of opposites, you know, yin, yang, male, female, soft, hard, whatever, mortal, immortal, feral, cultured, whatever set of binaries you want to use to like depict whatever given gradient spectrum you're talking about. That's kind of Gemini is embodying both of those simultaneously in a single psyche, and that's kind of the story of Gemini. So it's gathering all of the things, all of the possibilities, all of the theoreticals. Well, Virgo is the part of the Mercury ruled sign that then distills all of that, right? Takes all of the nutritious bits and integrates them, and excretes the wastes, right? Sometimes people say Virgo is linked to the digestive system. Yeah, that's a good one, right? Or any filtration system of the body, really. Because we're concerned with taking all of that information and refining it into like what is the most important, most perfect version of this thing. One of the keywords that Virgo often gets associated with it is perfection or perfectionism. It is the great lie of Virgo. Gemini also possesses many great lies. People are not surprised to hear this from the double-bodied sign of Gemini. However, Virgo also possesses many lies. They're just a little bit cleaner about it. Mercury is a trickster. Perfection doesn't exist, but the driving allure of Virgo is to perfect, refine, distill, separate the nutritious from the waste, from the worthless or whatever, find the perfect truth, and then marry heaven and earth, right? Because it's ruled by Mercury, this great intellectual sign, but it is an earth sign. And so the point of Virgo is they want something that is perfect and will work in the material world, that you can bring down from heaven to earth. So anyway, she's got the little sheaves of wheat in her hair. She has little aster daisy flowers because, innocence, purity. And then little butterflies because we're trying to like make the most perfect version of the thing. And, I don't know, transform these base caterpillar-like materials into something beautiful with wings. So, wings oftentimes represent elevated intellect or like enlightenment, right? Ascension, the ability to rise above problems. Caterpillars, butterflies, moths, whatever. They often represent the ability to do this by transforming something, right? Growing wings from, in this case, probably intellect. Because, Mercury. But there's a lot of flaws with Virgo. One of them is like, yeah, if you're really fixating on all the details, you might throw the baby out with the bathwater. You might take twice as long as you need to. They're very methodical. And I think I heard this from one of Austin's lectures, but I think it might have been the astrology lecture, but he had said something about how all of the mutable signs are dealing with like two opposites, two polarities. And in Virgo, it's the polarity between clean and dirty, pure and impure. And so even though Virgo would like to put on this perfect mask of sterility and clean system optimization and refinement, it's kind of like there's always a lot of stuff just sort of hidden under the rug, right? There's a lot of things that are just overlooked in the pursuit of being able to claim perfection. In my experience with people with a lot of heavy Virgo placements, this tends to be the case often. And it's not necessarily that it would be too ham-handed to say that they're just lying. It's almost like they refuse to see, particularly if it's within their own system, right? They refuse to see the imperfections within their own systems that they've constructed. So they'll create these really elaborate mental prisons where they have to do things exactly just the right way. And then if they do things exactly just the right way, then they will have found this perfect outcome of truth. And then if they have received a situation that is not that kind of would propose counter evidence, there's this weird, like, they'll try to like double flip, contort, back flip mentally their way out of it and be like, no, it actually is because of all these reasons. I say that with a lot of love. I have both my benefics and Virgo, so it definitely like has its good sides, I like to think. But yeah, there's some pitfalls there for sure. And I think part of it is this idea of like, if you're always presenting clean, sterile, optimized, efficient, things, right? There's a lot that gets sacrificed to do that and overlooked to do that, silenced, if you will. It's kind of like the idea with most, what do they call that genre? Like post-apocalyptic utopia kind of fantasies where, everything is perfect and beautiful and utopian on the surface because secretly underground or hidden away from societal gaze, we have like this disgusting, decrepit, slave labor, like Hunger Games-esque thing that's fueling the dream. So I think that's kind of cool. At least that's what Austin said the thing about the clean or the dirty, but it really tracks with Virgo's like pure, impure kind of a, we're trying to get the most perfectly distilled version of the thing, and that does come with its pitfalls. But Virgo is the ability to create something out of all the nonsense that Gemini brings, so it's got its strengths for sure. And this is not a bash on Virgo by any means. It's just that all of the different signs are so useful because they capture very particular strengths, propensities, weaknesses, proclivities. There's ways to work with every energy that can be constructive or destructive. And it kind of just depends where you're at, what you're doing. Oh, I don't know if I ever answered this question that nobody asked, but that came to my mind. Yeah, so the Nameless One, it's a much bigger card deck than I think a lot of people are used to. And how I shuffle it is I just grab the whole thing by the narrow end and I just do this. If you want a slow-mo version, I kind of grab like that. There you go. Very easy. And then I just, do chunks, sometimes one at a time, sometimes big chunks. And then when cards fly out, I consider that an indication that they very much want to be read, that they're very relevant. And if nothing falls out, then I'll just keep shuffling until I get sick of it. And then I say, okay, it's done. So that's how I shuffle with the Nameless One. There are people that have said they will like split the deck into smaller piles and then shuffle each individual pile. I don't think that's necessary, but whatever works for whoever. I don't have huge, humongous hands, but I don't have like the smallest hands in the world either. So for me, it's quite manageable, but, and they do spill out a little bit, but I don't find anything wrong with that. And actually, like I said, I kind of prefer it when something flies out, because then it's sort of indicating to me, oh, this card really has something to say. This is relevant. So I like it when that happens. So I sometimes, too, if I start getting bored, I'll try to be less precise with how I'm shuffling the cards so that more things are likely to fall out. Which, no, is not cheating. We have to pull cards eventually. Anyway, my deck disagrees with me. This is the reversed Six of Wands. So again, the Six of Wands is one of my favorite cards because it is the Jupiter-ruled decan of the zodiac sign Leo. It's typically, well, first of all, Jupiter's a benefic, right? The sun is the sun, the celestial king, that force which creates all life and which all life revolves around, good guy, great guy. Anyway, the point is, Jupiter the greater benefic is like, about uplifting things, spiritual things, good faith, mirth, belief, luck, sometimes abundance in all forms, expansion, growth, bigifying, as I sometimes say. So when we have something like that in the sign of Leo, which is the domicile of the sun, the life bringer of all, the animating spiritual force, and also quite ostentatious and showy and performative, right? Like to do with something that is solar, a solar activity is to be very obvious, to try to get viewers, to try to get a lot of people looking at you, to have things revolve around you. So the archetypes that we see with the sun are like rulers, kings, sovereigns, also sometimes entertainers or people who really like draw in the limelight, that kind of a situation. So usually these combination of Jupiter and the sun indicate success. Plain and simple, right? Recognition, renown, honors, acclaim, people celebrating your goodness, right? Like, what a good ruler you are. Thank you for giving us all of this light and a thing to revolve around. You're wonderful. We love you, that kind of thing. So this is a manticore with a crown because, he's got like the ram horns because the sun's exalted in Aries. He's the sign of Leo because, this is literally a decan of Leo. But also this like nice little scorpion tail because he's like big and powerful and everyone recognizes his power. And isn't that great? And these are the aspen trees. Aspen trees often represent courage, but also connection. And this is because underneath an aspen grove, all of the trees are actually connected in one organism. And they quake. They look like they quiver, which represents obviously fear. And so the idea is like living despite fear, or showing up in spite of fear, which is something, of course, that solar people have to deal with, right? I think most people probably experience anxiety or discomfort or stage fright in the limelight, even if they love it, but they do it anyway, right? They show up, they give the speech, they do whatever it is that they do for whatever reason. So anywho, also the yellow leaves look like coins, and for whatever reason, I always get this image with the Six of Wands where it's like, I don't know, people like throwing coins and flowers at the stage or something like that. Anyway, when it's reversed, it's like, oh, he perceived humiliation, no acclaim, no rewards. You didn't win. You did not pass go, and you do not get to collect $200 or whatever the saying is, $100. I don't know. If they made a current day Monopoly game, if you passed go, you'd be fined $200. Anyway, unless you had half the game, half the boardwalk or whatever, and then they would just like let you do it if you wanted. Anyway, so yeah, this is in my experience, it oftentimes comes up that the Six of Wands is something like humiliation. Hold on, let me get this to be more in there. It feels like humiliation, but it's almost always the internalized perception of humiliation. Like you set a goal you didn't meet and now you feel embarrassed, ashamed, or humiliated. But it doesn't necessarily mean that other people are like booing you from the stage, right? It can, I suppose, but I haven't really seen it manifest that way. Usually it's like you feel bad. You feel like you let yourself down. You feel like it didn't go as well as you wanted it to. And there's some kind of, you know, some kind of issue with that. Self-esteem is a big thing with Leo in general. So when you get a Leo Decan card or a card associated with Leo and it's reversed, a lot of the time there's some kind of ego wound. There's a self-esteem problem. There's some kind of issue with that. So that has been my experience of these cards so far. So yeah, I'd be like, okay, yeah, things are not going as quickly as you'd like because maybe you're fixating on the flaws and not looking at any other thing. And because of that, you feel ashamed and burdened, right? Yeah, I have a lot of experience with that. Having both benefics and Virgo kind of sucks. It's maybe the worst place for them to be because Jupiter is in detriment and Venus is in fall. So the greater things that are bringing you all of the goodness in life are severely handicapped. In detriment, it's just like, oh, it's not as strong, right? It's as far away from one of its homes as it could be, so it's weak, doesn't have a lot of resources. In my case, at least my Jupiter's in its own bound, so that's something. And then Venus is much more complicated because Venus being in fall, I don't know, in Virgo, in an earth sign by day chart, she's still in her own triplicity, and my Venus happens to be her own triplicity lord, she's her own bound lord, and she's also in her own decan. So she has an ability here and a power to make it work. And she's in, Virgo is a what we call a nocturnal sign, and she is behind the sun, which makes her an evening star in my personal chart. So she's got like a lot of things to rejoice in, but what I found have been one of the game changers about Austin's course in particular is his depiction of planets in fall as being planets that get stuck or they're like lured into a bear trap and they have a hard time getting out of that trap. It's not that planets in fall are weak, like in detriment, it's that they're overly hyper fixated on something that would be appealing to them, but then they get caught in this trap. So for Venus, it's like, I think it should be fairly obvious, right? Venus wants to make things beautiful and pleasurable and, pleasing, aesthetically pleasing, sensually pleasing, harmonious, wants to attract a bunch of like friends or admirers or whatever. And in Virgo, the trap is, oh, how do we do this? We make it perfect, right? We make it the most perfect thing, and then everyone will love us, and everything will turn out great. And so that's kind of the fall that Venus in Virgo ends up being in a lot. So I would say, like, with this reading in particular, it's like, oh, things are going slowly, and you're trying to nitpick every little thing, and you feel really bad about it, but we also got the Ace of Wands, so that's exciting. The Ace of Wands is one of my favorite cards. Maybe I'm just doing a reading for me at this point. But anyway, the Ace of Wands is that initial spark, the animating life force or principle that really gets you moving in some direction. Some people might describe this as ambition, motivation, drive, passion, right? All of those nice, good trigger words. It's really like this burning sensation, right? I love the Ace of Wands because to me, this is almost always, inspiration. Right? This is always like, I have a really good idea and I just cannot wait to go with it. It's kind of like the thing you're waiting for to ignite this whole forest fire and get it going. Here we go. So yes, so the Ace of Wands, very much you're motivated, you're inspired, you're really feeling it, you're energized, you got a bunch of great ideas, and now all we have to do is take this wand and make it a whole journey, right? Get the fire to the temple or whatever it is the quest is shaping up to be. And so, yeah, being highly motivated to achieve something or to do something, inspired, if you will. And then look at this too. We got the Nine of Swords. Was I not just talking about the Nine of Swords earlier? It's like, come on, man. My tarot deck is so fun. It's so fun when your tarot deck like stalks you and listens to you and shows you that it's listening. It's nice. It feels like I'm being heard. Anyway, yeah, the Nine of Swords is the Mars ruled decan in Gemini. So do you remember when I talked about before how like Mars is the tower and Gemini is, I often associate it with the mind or, you know, words. So it's like towers of the mind. It's like this guy screaming at you. It's all hours of the day, all of the things you can't do and why you're not good enough, and just like absolutely brutalizing you savagely because that's what Mars does, but with words because that's what Gemini has. So, you know, Demetra George in her book that I read with my book club, which I do recommend. It's fun. Yeah, Ancient Astrology in Theory and Practice, a Manual of Traditional Techniques, Volume 1, Assessing Planetary Condition by Demetra George. She has another just as big volume. So yeah, get that book if you wanna. But anyway, one of the things that she really pounds into you in this book is that a planet can only work with the resources available to it in the house and sign that it's in. So the sign kind of adds the flavor, the tone, the kinds of things, or like the flavor of the stuff. But the house topics are like what they have to work with, right? And so it's really funny because, you know, in Gemini, the kinds of things we have lying around are intellectual, verbal, communicative, data, like gathering stuff, right? It's a very social kind of a sign. I mean, it's literally like the projective aspect of Mercury. What do we do with projective thought? That's literally speech. That's literally talking. When we project our thoughts, we are speaking. So, you know, one thing I definitely associate with Gemini is speaking. I associate more thinking with Virgo, to be totally honest. It's more that distilling, that internalized process. Like when you grab something with your hands and bring it to your mouth, also Gemini rules the hands. That's Gemini, and everyone can see you do that, right? I mean, you can be sneaky about it, I guess. But like if you're grabbing something and you're eating it, you can see it. It's the obvious part of that aspect. When it goes into your body and you digest it, that's the more hidden, discreet, covered up, concealed part. When you think about Mercury, and he's a planet of intellect and, you know, all the good stuff, communication and travel sometimes, but we're not really talking about that aspect right now. The point is, right, so when we project our internal processes and mechanisms, we are speaking. Gemini is the projective aspect of Mercury, so yeah, pretty fair interpretation. By the way, these are my favorite glasses. Okay, tangent. I'm going to tell you this story about these glasses. When I was young, my mom had an entire collection of these blue glasses, these like blue cobalt glasses, and I loved drinking from them. I thought it made the whole world look like this fantasy underwater, like utopia or something. I used to like just go around looking through the blue glass and everything. Literally adding a Neptunian filter. I do have Neptune in the first. But anyway, so one by one, the glasses broke, and then we kind of only had one left. My mom got a new set of much less interesting dishware. And so I saved this one perfect blue glass that I just loved so much because I didn't want anyone else to break it, right? And I loved that glass, and I kept it in my room, and I used it for everything. It was a really elegant wine glass shape one, which, you know, when I was a young child made me feel so mature to drink water out of a wine glass, which is actually what I'm doing right now because I don't drink at all. But anyway, because I have both my benefics and Virgo, so I never indulge in alcohol or drugs because I'm so pure. That's not why. I'm really worried about losing myself to those kinds of things, but I don't think it's in me. I think addiction runs too strongly in my family, so I'm just staying away from the whole kit and caboodle. It's fine for some, but it's not for me. But anyway, so I was taking this glass and I was like protecting it so preciously, and I put it on my nightstand, and of course I was reading something, I don't remember what, but I was totally immersed in the story, and I just like flipped out because I get really energized by a good story. So I, you know, tossed my hand or whatever, and I totally spilled the glass and it broke everywhere. So it was really a moment of like Greek fate, you know. I tried to avoid the thing, and by doing so made it happen. Anyway, so I collect these blue glasses at like all the thrift stores that I go to. I should probably test them for lead, but I've never once done that. But I should. No. I think if I go crazy, people will just expect it of me anyways. They probably won't be able to tell the difference, if I'm being honest with you. So anyway, So this is the Mars ruled decan of Gemini. So we have all of these screaming thoughts. They're giving us all of this anxiety and keeping us up at night. In this illustration, this is supposed to be the hag or the nightmare, the terror, right? The old hag typically is depicted as like an old woman, but sometimes it's just like a leathery beast with, you know, wings and stuff. So she rides your body and gives you nightmares and contributes to sleep paralysis and does some really unpleasant stuff. And it's fun because in a lot of these old folk tales and stuff that I was researching, you can distract the visits from the nightly hag. You can distract the nightly visits from the old hag by doing things like disorganizing your shoes and putting them under your bed, or spilling salt on the floor, or putting a broomstick like broom side up by your bed. And the idea is that the old hag has to count every single piece of salt and organize every single grain or every single brush of the broom and resort all of your shoes before she can like get on you and ride you for the night and make you have nightmares and feast off your terror and give you horrible anxiety and stuff. And I found this to be so interesting because oftentimes the cure for anxiety is just like finding small solvable problems to like distract the hag, so to speak. Anyway, in this case, it's like we have all of these mundane swords and the skeleton is reaching for one of them because it's like, okay, maybe, you know, maybe you can't use all of these, but you can use one of them. You can do one thing at a time and just kind of take it slow, wait for the dawn to rise, right? There's another saying in a Russian fairy tale called Vasila the Beautiful, but she's a very popular character. Sometimes there are stories called Vasila the Brave, Vasila the whatever. It's pretty common. But anyway, in one of them, though, she has like this little doll that helps her to pass all of the trials of Baba Yaga, the witch of the woods. Anyway, while she goes to bed, the doll like solves all of her impossible tasks that the witch gives her to complete, or else she'll be eaten the next day. But every night she flips out and she tells the doll, and the doll is like, oh, fear not, for the morning is wiser than the evening. Say your nightly prayers, go to bed, and in the morning this will be solved. And, you know, in the fairy tale, it's because the doll is doing all of the work. But I think that the main, look at that. That's so funny. I think that the main takeaway, though, symbolically, is that, yeah, like your mind kind of can get away with you in the night, but in the morning, fresh eyes, you reassess, you feel better, and you're able to solve a problem that seemed impossible to solve when you were freaking out at night. Very mundane right there. This is the Ten of Wands. This is about, well, what do you think it's about? Right? Feeling very heavily burdened. Feeling like nothing you do will ever, you can't carry this weight, it will never work, and you're like so tired. It's also funny because this is the Ten of Wands, and so the 10 is the inevitable end of this beginning in the Ace of Wands. And it's like, yeah, you have this wonderful idea and you've accumulated all this stuff and you've gone through this journey, and now you have the burden of sustaining that weight for, you know, however long you're going to carry it for. And so it really is the burden of success, you know. If the story of the Wands cards is like, we're going to go out and conquer. We're going to go out and seize the day, make our dream a reality. When you can have this idea to like make the biggest empire that ever was, but then you have to maintain it, and that becomes a burden. This is the Saturn ruled decan of Sagittarius, by the way, in case anyone's interested. Sagittarius is marked by this great optimism and this like fiery drive to go and achieve and do good, do the maximum, most idealistic amount of good. And how we're going to do this is by synthesizing things that wouldn't normally work, but bring them together in unison, like, I don't know, a horse and a man, and teach it how to use a bow and arrow, and then won't it be such a machine like you've never seen before, right? So this is the kind of vibe in Sagittarius in general, like a lot of really optimistic, good intentions. And sometimes you shoot for the moon and you don't make it, you know. But the point is, even if you do, then you still have this burden of maintaining whatever it is that you've won, whatever it is that you've achieved. So it's kind of like the bigger your dreams, the heavier they are to hold. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you do reach this point where you have to make a conscious decision. Like, am I going to continue, or am I going to drop what I have and try something new, do a different thing? So anyway, this is an oracle card. This is the Two of Wands. I'm just getting a little preview here. This is nice. I don't know. This is not such a bad reading, to be honest. Don't love this reverse court card here, but that's okay. All right, so I think I'm just going to interpret these cards and then we'll call it a night because it's already 10:52 and we got no views, but that's fine. That's okay. I don't know how likely it is to do these night ones, to be honest. And I don't know. I don't like the idea of people being subscribed to my Patreon at the video live stream level and then not being able to make it because the time zones don't work out. So my idea was to have one at 10 o'clock in the morning and one at 10 o'clock at night, so it would kind of balance it out. But I don't know. I don't know. I'm considering just making it Wednesdays because it would be easier for me and if people don't mind. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes because we'll just see. This is an oracle card I made. It's called the King Cat. This is like taking. Sorry, my dog just walked in here. Miss Magic is rolling around on the rug. Aren't you? You're making a lot of noise. Yeah, you are. You are. Anyway, hi Magic. Miss Magic. Okay, anyway. Yeah, so this is about self-sovereignty, basically. Cats do whatever they want, whenever they want, because it pleases them, and they really don't give a crap what you think. If you're doing your biggest dissertation essay paper thing that's like the biggest deal of your life, they'll just come and sit right on your computer and delete the whole thing like they don't give a crap. They'll do whatever they want because they're little agents of free will, and they just don't, they're driven by hunger and desire and urges or whatever, but they do what they want when they want, and they don't have to explain themselves. So that was the idea, right? Peonies are also about like elegance, regality, power, beauty, also humility though. So it's kind of this nice balance of like, do whatever you want because you are ultimately in charge of your life. Even if you are in a situation that you hate, you are choosing to remain in that situation because for whatever reason you perceive it to be the best of the available options, or you're scared of what else there could be, or whatever the reasons, right? There's always a choice. There's always something you can do. You might not like what is else available to you at the time, but that these are what we have to work with, right? So anyway, so when we get this card reversed, sometimes I see this as like self-sabotage, like you're purposefully deciding not to do something because, subconsciously you're afraid of success or whatever. Sometimes it's also just you are not feeling your agency quite the way you might otherwise feel. You feel like forces outside of your control are dictating your thoughts or actions. The Nameless One has a card called the Tools of Fate and Free Will, and that one leans a little bit more leaning towards like this is fated, certain things you have to do. So this is kind of the counterbalance to this card. This is like, well, you are the ruler of your life, right? Like you're you and you get to, chart your course. So there are always options and choices available to you. Whether or not you make use of any of them is also up to you. Anyway, when it's reversed, it's kind of like, well, maybe we're just waiting for things to play out. Maybe we feel like we don't have any power or we can't make a difference, or we're just choosing not to see the ways in which we do have power, which, we're all guilty of. It happens. Sometimes you don't want to admit that you could change something because for whatever reason, even if it is inducing a fair amount of suffering, it feels like it's deserved or like it's better than you could otherwise get, or you're just afraid of the unknown, or whatever the case may be. Sometimes that's what happens. This is the Two of Wands. This is the Mars ruled decan of the Mars ruled sign Aries. This is about charting your course, right? Figuring out. So you have this thing happen where you have inspiration for an idea. And then you kind of figure out, okay, what are my tools? Where am I going? How do I navigate? What do I do? And you also have this very like bursting kind of power, right? Like you could go out and reach it, take the world, take the world by storm, go out and conquer, right? Do your thing. So the Two of Wands is often a card of both planning and preparation, and also this kind of like burning desire to like, yes, I am in control. I can do it. I'm going to go figure out how to do it, and then I'm going to dive right in. So that's kind of fun. This is like a, like a magic ball, also a magic orb sphere, right? Crystal ball. Also sort of looks like the world and the hands reaching for it. These are rowan branches, which are used for divination and protection and a bunch of other things. This is an oracle card I made called the Corpses of Creation, right? Let's not forget that every creative project, first of all, it's kind of painful to make. There's a lot of hours of like labor and drudgery and stuff, but also I don't think I'd be the only artist to tell you that a lot of inspiration comes from painful or unfortunate circumstances. I don't know, for whatever reason, maybe inspiration, love, suffering. I don't know. It's certainly not the only source of inspiration, but it is one that gets used a lot. And also, I don't know. I really think that the pearl and the mollusk is a great example of the creative process from the perspective of the creator, because I don't know. Sometimes I do feel like there's this really benefic, like muse-like figure, guiding me to what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm just a conduit or whatever. But also, if you ignore that feeling, or if you are tormented by feelings of inadequacy or whatever, like it becomes an irritant. And so there's something in you that's like burning or needs to be released. I used to always compare drawing as like a demonic exorcism. Like I have to get this thought out of my body right now. Um, and so the pearl was a really perfect example of that, because for all of this pain or suffering or chafing that is like trying to figure it out and make it the way it's supposed to be or the way it needs to be or wants to be or whatever, it becomes a great burden. Where's that burden card? It becomes a great burden. You feel like you're not in control of yourself anymore. And you still have to navigate, though. You still have to kind of figure out where it's going. And then at the end, you get this really beautiful pearl, which hopefully is the result you want. When it's reversed, though, a lot of the times we're just in our gestation process. Like nothing's happening because it's not supposed to happen. Again, going back to this divine timing idea. Nothing happens because it's not supposed to happen, because we're still in this gestation period. We've got the sand in our in our mollusk. We've got something that's kind of like irritating that we want to get out, and we don't exactly know what it is, but we're still coding it. We're still trying to round it out, figure out what we're going to do with it. And if we do this correctly, we get the 10 of Pentacles. The 10 of Pentacles is the Mercury-ruled decan of the Mercury-ruled sign, Virgo, which we've talked about earlier, didn't we? Where are you, Virgo? There you are. Virgo. Funny how all these cards are kind of connecting back to, we're not really talking about anything in particular because we have no questions, but we're just drawing cards and interpreting them. But anyway, in the Mercury-ruled sign of the Mercury-ruled decan of the Mercury-ruled sign Virgo, we have this incredible potential for Mercury to do our plans, right? Our plans, our ideas, our systems become so refined, so optimized that they outlive us. And not only do they outlive us, but they might grow and inform future generations, right? These are things like, I don't know, for better or for worse. The founding fathers in America, right? Like they created a system, they created an environment, an idea that was so optimized and refined that it outlived them by hundreds of years. Now, I'm not trying to say America's super great, right? But somebody builds a city, somebody builds a nation, somebody goes out and conquers a thing, right? There's a whole bunch of movement and other people and time and labor that goes into it that doesn't get sort of seen. But at the end of the day, like things begin because some person has like a spark, an inspiration, a desire, and then they spread that spark, that inspiration, that desire, like wildfire, to other people. And they come together and they build this thing. And this thing is a system that outlives them, that informs their generation, that informs future generations, that might change the scope of how people are playing this game forever. We are still using the system of ancient astrology that Hellenistic astrologers and before Mesopotamian and Babylonian astrologers were using. And we've refined it throughout the decades, but it's literally a 2,000-year-old system. That is an extremely elegant, refined, intellectual system that has outlived all of its creators and continues to grow independent of them because of how brilliant it is. So this is the kind of power we're talking about with this decan of Mercury. I don't know. I'm very envious if people have their Mercury here, to be honest. It sounds like a great shtick. But, yeah, so this is, there's a coin from each of the other cards in the deck in this, the 10 of coins, and then there's the little rabbits and the treasure chest, right? Because every single leg of the journey has contributed to this chest of wealth that then can support future generations for, who knows? Who knows, right? Like I said, we're still using astrology, and that's probably the oldest system mankind's ever done. It probably, and this is just my conjecture, total conjecture here, not backed by anything, it probably does predate agriculture. You know what I mean? Because you look at the stars to navigate, and obviously hunter-gatherers did that. So I'm sure for as long as mankind has been looking up at the heavens and wondering about what that means for him on Earth, him or her, we've been doing some level of astrology. So anyway, yeah, beautiful, perfect, refined system. 10 out of 10, would recommend. Everybody should learn it. We should be teaching it in school. And that's my hot take. Hey, this is Gemini. I don't know. I don't know. I literally started talking about Gemini, so of course Gemini is going to make an appearance. But here, yeah, Gemini and Virgo, aren't they cute? The two poles of Mercury. For whatever reason, we're actually getting a lot of Mercury, because this was the Mercury ruled decan of Sagittarius. These are two Mercury ruled ones. This is a Mercury ruled one. This is in Gemini, so this is, you know, Mercury ruled. This is an oracle card, so it has no connection to anything. This is Jupiter. This is an oracle card. It has no connection. And Ace is just the element. It doesn't have an astrological. It's all of them, right? Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. So yeah, we have some like fire misplaces. We have the Saturn ruled decan of Sagittarius, the Jupiter ruled decan of Leo, and the Aries ruled decan of Mars. Sorry, the Mars ruled decan of Aries. I got that reversed. So yeah, outside of these three fire guys, these are all the other cards have been mercurial, which, you know, I don't know, that's like, what is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, I wouldn't count the oracle cards in the lineup because they don't really, I gave them planetary associations, but not like the decans. I kind of just, for the oracle cards in the grimoire, I kind of just thought of like what planets generally and what signs generally the combination is I was going for. But I would do things like put, oh, you know, Pluto in Capricorn or something. I wasn't talking about like a decan in Capricorn ruled by Pluto. There isn't one. I just meant like generally speaking, this is how I envision these energies to be mixing and like pertaining to the cards. But I didn't clarify that in the grimoire. That's one of the things that I really would refine in a second edition, because I didn't make that clear enough. And I just kind of, those ones were more like, the oracle cards were just more intuitive and kind of what I felt I could personally use. And to be honest, I actually started the whole premise of the Nameless One with the oracle cards. The idea to add the tarot came after, which is why the oracle cards are even in there, because I didn't want to throw them away. I still felt that they were useful and distinctly different from the tarot part. But as I was creating the Nameless One, I was like, oh, you know, if I'm looking for to make a list, a grouping, a key, a book of keys for sigils that I can kind of get out and use over and over and over again for situations that have a similar energy but are a bit different, the tarot is actually a great format for this. So then I kind of abandoned the oracle part and I started making them based off the tarot. And that is the story of how the Nameless One came to be. I was just doing it for me originally, but then because of course I have a Leo sun, I had to post it all over Instagram, because what's the point of doing anything if you're never going to show anybody, right? There is a point. I know that there is, but it's hard for me to see it. But anyway, so I posted it on Instagram, and then people started telling me like, oh, are you making this a deck? Like, please make this a deck. This will be so awesome. And honestly, I just felt bad saying no over and over again. So then I gave in and I did it, and I made it available to everyone. And I wasn't going to, not because I wanted, it was personal. It was like a personal thing. I was going through a rough time. I actually had a lot of depression after both of my pregnancies, which went completely ignored and undiagnosed and was not anything, but it was like really hard. My first one, anyway, the point is that was after my son was born through an emergency C-section where everything went wrong and not according to plan. That was when I was making the Nameless One, right? Basically right after that, as I was recovering from this very injurious time. So, yeah, sigil magic was really instrumental in my mental recovery for that whole process, and I believe in it very strongly, but it was personal and I didn't really want to share it with everybody, but then people asked, and then I thought, well, I don't know, maybe people will think I'm crazy and make fun of me, but maybe it will help them too, and then I guess it will have been worth it. So that's what I did. Anywho, yeah, so I would say if we don't count the oracle cards, more of the cards than not were Mercury influenced, let's say. Not ruled, but, well, yeah, I mean ruled. Ruled by Mercury. Despite it being Venus's day, Venus's hour, when Venus ingressed into Taurus for domicile, we're still talking about Mercury? That's so rude. But here's Venus, the ruler of Libra. Also, for me, it makes sense because, you know, my Mercury is ruling my Venus. So we really can't, although they're in aversion, she's kind of, I don't know. I still don't quite know what to make of aversions, to be honest. So in astrology, in ancient astrology, there's the only aspects are like the trine, the sextile, the square, the opposition, and the conjunction. And the conjunction isn't technically seen as an aspect either, but whatever, it's an aspect, in my opinion. And also it is something that is recognized, but they don't really think of it the same way. Anyway, so there, I know that in modern astrology, I guess, there's like an aspect relationship between planets that are right next to each other, like, but in different signs. So like if you have something in, I don't know, Virgo and Leo, they're right next to each other. But in ancient astrology, that's called an aversion, and it's a distinct lack of connection. And so, like, for example, Venus in Virgo does not see her domicile lord Mercury in Leo, so she's supposed to not be getting any resources from him. On the other hand, I don't know, my Venus is super obvious. It's ruling the 10th house, and it's got all of this accidental dignity besides, you know, she's in fall, but besides that, she has every other kind of dignity she could have. So, you know, she's doing all right. But the more I think about that, and it's so mercurial, right? Like, she's still in his house, and everything I do in my art is very, like, intellectual and symbolic. Like, I'm really trying to communicate a message with every single picture, which is a Mercury thing to do with your art. You know, some people just paint beautiful pictures of cottages or whatever, but that's not what I do. And some people just are like totally intuitively led into the process with no idea or no like thought. They just are like doing it on totally different wavelength than me, but that's also not what I do. I mean, I do have, when I'm in it, this kind of like intuitive connection to what I'm, you know, it feels very like, I don't know, channeling something. But there's a lot of like research that goes ahead of it. There's a lot of direction. There's a lot of specific symbolism used for a specific intent. So in that way, I suppose it is quite logical. But the point is, everything that is Venusian is also very mercurial for me. So I keep being like, how is she not receiving anything from Mercury? Now, she is still having to use all of the things in his house to get her shit done because she finds herself in his house. He just doesn't apparently know it, so he can't really help her with anything. But I don't know. I wonder about what the metaphor is there. Like, because, so like triplicity, Dimitri George explains it as having like, I don't know, friends, family, supporters, or followers that like help you to do your thing. And which is very true. Obviously, I can't do any of my artwork without my supporters and followers who literally funded the deck on Kickstarter and all of that. So that's like very obvious that she has that. But I wonder what the metaphor here is. Like, you're in somebody's mansion, they don't know you're there, but like the wait staff is super helpful to you, or like you happen to be in a big crowd that can help you somehow, or I don't know. It helps me to figure out how to like conceptualize these things, and I struggle with the aversion of the benefics to their domicile lord because I don't know. It just feels like there is some kind of relationship there, and I don't know if just ruling it is enough. I think, I mean, in ancient astrology, they certainly want you to have some kind of aspect between them. Just ruling it isn't enough unless they are also in your other sign that you rule, and they are in, like if Mercury was in Gemini ruling that from Virgo or whatever, but if he was in Gemini, he'd be making an aspect, so it doesn't matter. Bad example. In Dimitri George's book, there's an example of Pablo Picasso, and he has Saturn and Jupiter in Taurus in the 10th, and Venus in Libra in the 3rd, I want to say. I think it was. I don't remember. I can't do math that quick. But anyway, and so she was saying that even though Jupiter and Saturn don't get any like aspect from Venus because Venus is in her other domicile, there's like a mutual share of generosity there. Like she can still provide for them. So that situation would be okay, but it's not the same if Mercury's in Leo ruling them from Virgo, where he just can't see them, and also there's no aspect, and also he is not the one ruling Leo. So I don't know. I struggle to understand still. I'm still learning. Yeah, which I don't know. I kind of think I'll always be learning astrology. There's always so much more data to collect. But at any rate, so this is Libra. So as you can see here, we have the scales, the sign for Libra here. This is an air sign, so it's got here. The Venus is the ruler. That's what this sign is here. And then there's the 2 constellations on either side. So this was reversed. So yeah, so it's almost like Venus made an appearance just to make a non-appearance, just to be like, we're not talking about this right now. But it's also funny because, you know, Libra is my 10th house, which is where you're the most visible. And the live's over and nobody came. Which is fine. It's fine. Hopefully this will still be interesting to you guys when you see it later. And it's still very good practice, I think, to get out the cards and hang out with them. They're lots of fun. I love being called out by my tarot deck in a way that's like in front of nobody, but will be in front of potentially people. It's kind of a weird feeling. So I hope you appreciated this overshare in the guise of educational pursuits or whatever. So I don't know, word salad. I'm so tired. I'm gonna go to bed. So in the future, if anybody is watching this, thank you for watching this, and I hope to see you at some point in the future. So have a great night, and be sure to appreciate Venus wherever she is in your chart, because she's domicile in Taurus right now, and I had a really great day, so thank you, Venus. I'm totally attributing that to Venus because it was all very Venusian ways to have a great day. And I hope everyone else is too, although that's probably statistically unlikely. But anyway, try to enjoy it. So wherever Venus is in your chart, wherever Taurus is, whatever that house topic governs, try to see the good in it and the beauty and the pleasure and the harmony, and try to make the most of it, because she's very powerful right now. If you want to do something that is beautiful and harmonic and pleasurable in the house topic of your life that is Taurus, maybe ask Venus for a little favor. Maybe she'll be more receptive to you than she otherwise would be, preferably on a Friday, if you are able to wait that long. Okay, well, see you later. Thanks. Bye.